Welcome to Shocking American Scandals That Shocked the Nation, a title which, much like a Nicolas Cage monologue, somehow manages to be both understated and completely over the top. Over the next few episodes, we'll be taking a deep dive, and by deep dive, I mean more like a slightly submerged wading pool into the murky waters of American scandal. We're talking about those moments in history where the truth decided to take a little vacation, ethics got left on a milk carton, and the American people were left wondering if their government and institutions had gone completely bonkers. Spoiler alert, sometimes they did. These stories, much like a raccoon that's gotten into a bag of Cheetos, are messy, unbelievable, and you'll want to tell everyone you know about them. We'll cover everything from presidential peccadillos to corporate chicanery, from doping debacles to financial fiascos that would make Bernie Madoff blush. So buckle up, grab your popcorn, and maybe a stiff drink or two because you're about to witness the best of the worst of American history. And honestly, who needs fictional dramas when you've got real-life scandals this juicy? Our first scandal takes us back to the 1970s, a time of bell-bottoms, disco fever, and the Watergate scandal. You might think, Watergate? Boring. But this story has more twists than a game of Twister in a hurricane. It started with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. 5 burglars were caught, and it was no ordinary robbery. They were linked to Nixon's re-election campaign, trying to bug the opposition's phones. It snowballed into a constitutional crisis with secret tapes and hush money. As the investigation into the Watergate break-in intensified, a game of cat and mouse ensued between the White House and those determined to uncover the truth. Nixon, with his trademark jowls quivering with indignation, repeatedly denied any involvement in the scandal, famously declaring, "I am not a crook." And then came the tapes. Nixon had been secretly recording all conversations in the Oval Office. These tapes, once thought to be Nixon's saving grace, became his undoing. The release of these tapes sent shockwaves through the nation. The president had been caught red-handed, lying to the American people and abusing his power. Let's rewind to the Roaring '20s, a time of flapper dresses, jazz music, and bathtub gin. It was an era of prosperity and rampant government corruption. Enter the Teapot Dome scandal, a tale of oil, bribery, and shady dealings. President Warren G. Harding, not a criminal mastermind, but surrounded by ethically challenged associates. Albert Fall, Harding's Secretary of the Interior, leased government oil reserves for bribes. These reserves in Teapot Dome, Wyoming, and Elk Hills, California, were meant for the Navy. But Fall's friends in the oil industry lined his pockets for access to these resources. Now you might be thinking, okay, so a government official took some bribes. That's bad. But is it really that shocking? This was the 1920s. Standards were different. Doctors recommended cigarettes to calm nerves. So, yeah, this was a big deal. The Teapot Dome scandal symbolized corruption in the Harding administration. Newspapers had a field day, publishing scathing editorials and cartoons depicting Fall and his cronies as greedy fat cats. The public was outraged. It wasn't just about oil, it was a betrayal of public trust. The scandal led to investigations, indictments, and convictions. Fall was found guilty of bribery. The Teapot Dome scandal exposed the dark underbelly of American politics and the corrupting influence of money and power. Buckle up. We're diving into the 1980s, a time of big hair, shoulder pads, and a scandal so convoluted it would make your head spin. The Iran-Contra affair involved the Reagan administration doing something unbelievably stupid. The US decided to sell weapons to Iran. Iran was, at the time, our sworn enemy. The money from these sales funded the Contras, a rebel group in Nicaragua. Instead of cookies, it was weapons. Instead of your mom, it was Congress. And instead of a tummy ache, it was an international incident. Now, you might think that selling arms to your sworn enemy to fund a group Congress told you not to fund would be a pretty open and shut case of things you shouldn't do. And you'd be right. However, proving it was a whole other bag of worms. The Reagan administration, in a move that surprised absolutely no one, engaged in a truly epic cover-up. They shredded documents like they were going out of style, officials developed sudden and severe cases of amnesia, and the whole thing became a giant game of who knew what and when did they know it. The subsequent hearings were like watching a group of toddlers try to explain how a plate of cookies mysteriously disappeared. There was a lot of finger-pointing, some questionable denials, and ultimately, no one really took the fall. The Iran-Contra affair left a lasting stain on the Reagan presidency and eroded public trust in the government. It showed that even in the land of the free and the home of the brave, things could get shady as hell behind closed doors. And in a truly shocking twist, it also showed that sometimes those in power can get away with things they really shouldn't. Who would have thought? Well, folks, it seems the 1990s, a decade known for its questionable fashion choices and even more questionable dance moves, also brought us a political scandal for the ages. This wasn't just any scandal, though. This was a scandal involving a sitting president, a White House intern, and a certain blue dress. Yes, we're talking about the one and only Monica Lewinsky scandal. Now, I know what you're thinking, John, please. Not another word about stained dresses and cigar mishaps. And believe me, I get it. But the Lewinsky scandal wasn't just about a tawdry affair. It was about abuse of power, about the audacity of lying to the American people while standing in the Oval Office, no less, and about the media circus that ensued, turning a deeply personal matter into a national punchline. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, only the car was the American presidency, and everyone involved seemed determined to keep their foot on the gas. The fallout from the Lewinsky scandal was about as subtle as a sledgehammer to a mirror. Bill Clinton became the second president in U.S. history to be impeached by the House of Representatives. The charges? Perjury and obstruction of justice. He was ultimately acquitted by the Senate, but the damage was done. His approval ratings took a nosedive, casting a long shadow over his remaining time in office. The scandal sparked a national conversation about sexual harassment and power dynamics. Monica Lewinsky was slut-shamed and ridiculed, while Clinton largely escaped unscathed. Now let's talk about a scandal so audacious, so brazen, it makes Bernie Madoff look like an amateur pickpocket. That's right, folks, we're diving into the cesspool of corporate greed that was the Enron scandal. Enron, an energy giant based in Houston, Texas, was once hailed as a shining example of American capitalism. They were the innovators, the disruptors, the guys who claimed to be changing the world, one shady accounting practice at a time. But behind the slick marketing campaigns and the CEO's million-dollar smile lurked a truth so ugly, so morally bankrupt, it would make your accountant spontaneously combust. See, Enron's success was a sham, a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, deceit, and enough cooked books to cater a cannibalistic convention. They were masters of financial engineering, which is a fancy way of saying they were really good at making things up. They used accounting loopholes, off-the-books partnerships, and other shady tactics to inflate their earnings, hide their debts, and basically pull off a financial magic trick so impressive, it made David Copperfield look like a street magician with a deck of bicycle cards. For years, Enron's executives lived like kings, raking in millions while their employees, many of whom lost their entire life savings in the company's collapse, were left wondering what the hell happened. Because, of course, like every house of cards built on a foundation of lies, deceit, and questionable accounting practices, Enron eventually crumbled. In 2001, the company filed for bankruptcy, becoming at the time the largest corporate collapse in American history. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, their pensions, their faith in humanity, and probably a few years off their lives thanks to the stress. The Enron scandal sent shockwaves through the corporate world, exposing the dark underbelly of American capitalism and the dangers of deregulation. It was a stark reminder that greed, left unchecked, can have devastating consequences. And it also led to the passage of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, a law designed to prevent future Enrons by, actually holding corporations accountable for their actions. Because apparently, that wasn't a thing before. Lance Armstrong, the man who, after a brutal battle with cancer, hopped on a bicycle and just absolutely demolished the Tour de France, winning it a record 7 consecutive times. Inspiring, right? A true testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Well, about those wins. Turns out, Armstrong's incredible feats of athleticism were about as real as a $3 bill. Behind the inspiring comeback story and the Livestrong bracelets was a meticulously crafted web of lies, deceit, and enough performance-enhancing drugs to make a Russian weightlifting team blush. Because yes, in a plot twist that surprised absolutely no one who understands how elite cycling works, Armstrong was juicing. And we're not talking about your grandma's prune juice here. We're talking EPO, blood transfusions, testosterone, you name it. Armstrong probably ingested, or rubbed it on his suspiciously hairless legs at some point. But here's the thing about lying. You need to have a good memory. And Lance, well, he must have been too busy training for the Tour de Liard to keep his story straight, because the man just couldn't help but contradict himself, throw former teammates under the bus, and generally act like a petulant child who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Now, you might be thinking, John, why are we even talking about this? It's just cycling. And to you, I say first, how dare you? Second, this scandal wasn't just about cycling. It was about the erosion of trust in a hero, in a sport, and in the very idea of fair play. For years, Armstrong denied everything. He bullied anyone who dared question his integrity, suing journalists and former friends into silence. He even went on Oprah, the ultimate arbiter of truth and emotional vulnerability, and lied straight to her perfectly coiffed head. But the truth, much like a professional cyclist hopped up on EPO, eventually caught up with him. In 2012, after years of speculation and investigations, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency released a damning report filled with eyewitness accounts and scientific evidence that confirmed what everyone already knew. Lance Armstrong was a fraud. The fallout was swift and brutal. Armstrong was stripped of his Tour de France titles, lost lucrative endorsement deals, and became a pariah in the world of sports. He eventually confessed to doping in a cringeworthy interview with Oprah, but by then, the damage was done. The hero was exposed as a cheat, and the world collectively shrugged and said, "See, we knew it." Ah, Wall Street. A magical land where money mysteriously appears, and in this den of financial wizardry, no one quite captured the allure of easy money like Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was running the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Imagine a giant financial game of Jenga, where instead of wooden blocks, you're using other people's money. It's a house of cards built on deception, greed, and the unshakable belief that you'll never, ever get caught. For years, Madoff kept his scheme afloat, cultivating an air of exclusivity. He preyed on trust, targeting Jewish communities and organizations. But even the most elaborate Ponzi schemes eventually crumble. They rely on new money to pay off old investors. When the flow of cash dries up, it's like pulling the wrong block in Jenga. The tower collapses. In 2008, amidst the financial crisis, Madoff's empire fell. He confessed to his sons that his business was a lie. Investors were left financially ruined. Charities and foundations shut down. Madoff traded his suits for an orange jumpsuit and a 150-year sentence. The Wizard of Wall Street was exposed as a common criminal. Ah, Germany! Land of beer, bratwurst, and blatant corporate fraud? Volkswagen's Dieselgate scandal made us all suspicious. They marketed clean diesel cars as fuel-efficient and eco-friendly, but these cars emitted up to 40 times the legal limit of nitrogen oxide. Volkswagen cheated with software that faked emissions test results. For years, Volkswagen enjoyed record sales of their clean diesel cars. But as with all good things, the jig was eventually up. In 2015, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency caught wind of Volkswagen's scheme. The scandal, dubbed Dieselgate, sent shockwaves through the industry. Volkswagen faced billions in fines, lawsuits, and recall costs. And their reputation, well, it took a serious hit. Ah, Wells Fargo, the beloved Stagecoach bank. You know, the one that assures you they're trustworthy while simultaneously charging you $5 to withdraw your own money from their ATM? Well, buckle up, because their history is as shady as a payday loan shop behind a gas station. In 2016, news broke that Wells Fargo employees had been creating millions, yes, millions of fake bank accounts in customers' names without their knowledge or consent. It was the corporate equivalent of finding out your grandma's knitting club was actually a front for an international drug ring. Now you might be thinking, why on earth would they do that? Well, the answer, my friends, is as American as apple pie and tax loopholes, greed. See, Wells Fargo had this cross-selling culture, which is a polite way of saying they pressured their employees to shove as many financial products down their customers' throats as possible, whether they needed them or not. Think of it like this. You go in for a routine checkup and suddenly, your doctor is trying to sell you timeshares and extended warranties on your internal organs. It's that level of aggressive and utterly unnecessary. As you can imagine, this whole fake account fiasco didn't exactly endear Wells Fargo to, well, anyone. They were slapped with billions of dollars in fines, their CEO was dragged before Congress, and forced to do his best impression of a deer caught in headlights, and their reputation was about as tarnished as a trumpet in a hurricane. The scandal sent shockwaves through the banking industry and beyond, exposing the dark side of corporate greed and the very real human cost of unchecked ambition. It also led to some much-needed reforms like, making it slightly harder for banks to open fake accounts in your name without your knowledge. But let's be honest, even with the fines and the public shaming, Wells Fargo is still out there, doing, well, whatever it is Wells Fargo does. And that's the truly terrifying part, isn't it? Because it makes you wonder what other shenanigans are going on behind the scenes, not just at Wells Fargo, but at all these institutions we're supposed to trust. So the next time you walk past a Wells Fargo, maybe just give it a side eye. For old time's sake. College admissions. That time-honored tradition where stressed-out teenagers compete for a chance to bankrupt themselves in pursuit of higher education. But in 2019, the curtain was pulled back on a whole new level of college admissions insanity with the bombshell scandal dubbed Operation Varsity Blues. This was a full-blown conspiracy involving wealthy parents, shady college consultants, and enough bribery to make your average politician blush. As details of the scandal unfolded, it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck of privilege and entitlement. Actresses like Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin gamed the system for their children. Public outrage questioned the fairness of a system where wealth buys opportunity. Universities scrambled to distance themselves, and some faced legal consequences. Operation Varsity Blues exposed a system rigged against those without wealth or fame. Well, there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour of some of the most shocking scandals in American history. From political corruption to corporate greed, doping athletes to fraudulent college admissions schemes, we've seen it all. The good, the bad, and the utterly bewildering. These scandals remind us that truth is often stranger than fiction. It's enough to make you want to don a tinfoil hat and retreat to a bunker. But before you do, remember this. For every shady CEO or politician lining their pockets, there are countless others fighting for what's right, exposing corruption, and holding the powerful accountable. If you found this video shocking, don't forget to share it with your friends and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Remember, folks, stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay skeptical.